Jacey's Kingdom, Episode 1, Exam. The girl sitting at the back of the hall was feeling sick again. She'd thrown up twice already that morning, once in her own bathroom at home, then again in the school loos, just before they all filed in. Jacinda Jackson had felt poorly for the last few days, but was determined that flu, or whatever it was that was making her feel so lousy, wouldn't stop her taking her last A-level exam. The long planned for prize was too close now, too big to miss. Reading history at Cambridge. She had excelled at all her other exams, and this was her favourite subject, the very thing she found so exciting yet so easy. History itself. Damn. Others looked up at a burst of annoyance with herself. A sigh that turned into a low groan as she felt a knot of pain in her stomach. The room felt increasingly cold to her. She began to shiver and somehow couldn't stop. The invigilator began to move across the room towards her, either to shush her quiet or ask what was wrong, and Jacinda didn't know, but she didn't have time to deal with either, waving the woman away with an irritated gesture. The headache was back as well. She'd had it since it had woken her at 5 a.m. with the ferocity of a little man with a hammer beating her brains out from the inside. After a shower and a coffee, plus a couple of painkillers, the bashing has subsided a little. Now it was doing an unwanted encore. Her palms felt cold and clammy. She shivered again. Something else was happening. Something more than just flu or nervous exhaustion brought on by long nights of revision. She'd never felt like this before. At the dentist when she was a little kid, even when she fell off her pony that time and cracked her skull. She'd been woozy then, and dizzy and disorientated, but not as shaky and faint as she was feeling at this moment. Jacinda felt the blood drain from her cheeks. Her head did a sudden involuntary twitch. She felt about to pee herself. There was sick in her mouth. Her brain burned like fire. Shakily she raised her hand. Miss. That was when the first explosion happened. Could you have an explosion just inside your own head? Nobody else had heard it. Nobody else had seen the crackling streaks of light stabbing deep into her consciousness. She was sure because nobody else in the hall appeared to feel the searing pain, be deafened by the thunderclap in her ears, or shudder at the earthquake vibrating down her spine. It must be an internal earthquake then, a personal thunderclap, a terrible pain all her own. That was even scarier. Her mind refused to believe what was happening. It dived for cover, skipping to old Star Trek movies, where everyone flung themselves around when the ship was hit by a meteorite storm or a photon torpedo. Deflect the shields down, the bridge would shout to Captain Kirk, and he'd tell them to get those damn shields up fast. That was what she wanted to say to her mind right now, in the brief few moments of respite, as her shaking hands gripped the desk. Get those damn shields up fast. Please someone. Anyone. The second explosion was even bigger. It must have been because now she seemed to be lying on the floor, gazing through a tilted forest of legs. Two of them started running towards her. It went black for a moment, then the invigilator's face filled her vision. He looked strained and panicky, drained of colour, the expression taut, almost angry. Had she done something wrong? Cheated somehow in the exam? She didn't think so, but the face kept moving backwards and forwards, swaying like a snake's head before her. Others joined it, some of them her mates, some she barely knew. All wore the same helpless expression, gazing at each other and away, then back at her again. Mouths opened, yet no sound came out. Her ears were full of a distant roaring, like an ocean coming closer and closer by the second. She felt hands around her own face, brushing her hair away from her eyes, cradling her. And then, quite suddenly, the ocean was on top of her. The hands waved around inside it, like an enemy's, as the thick green water closed over her head and began to drag her down. She struggled. In her mind she struggled to resurface, but the pull of its silent current was too strong. Its tentacles grabbed at her body and pulled her down again, down into the growing darkness. The faces slipped away, and she was finally alone. She found the dark soothing at first. When the images before your eyes scare the living daylights out of you, the dark is a good place to hide. But then it began to frighten her. She felt like a beast cowering in a cave. Maybe there was something else inside the darkness with her, something waiting to pounce, finish her off for good. She wanted to get out. Jacey opened her eyes. Now she was in a box, lying on her back, strapped to something hard. She found her arms forced down by her sides. She felt sick, giddy, but the box kept shaking. There were voices talking. She's awake. 2 white-coated men were in the shaking box with her. One young and fair-haired, the other bald and much older. It was the younger who'd spoken. He bent down towards her, and she felt a hand placed on her brow, gently placed, as if in reassurance. He had a strong face, serious, and yet the eyes were kind. She tried to focus on his blue eyes, tried to transmit a message to them. If it was the last thing she ever did, somehow she'd get it through. Make the shaking stop, the pain, the fear, make it go away. She felt her hand taking another's grip. I'm right here, Jacey. Don't be scared. Try to stay with me. But then the face in front of her began to slip away, just as the others had before, just as the world had. She tried to hold on, but her fingers were pulled from the hand's grasp, and she fell out of the shaking box and into the darkness again. She woke to find a beam of light had penetrated the cave, as if beckoning her to follow to its source. Warily she got to her feet. As the shadows fell away, a room formed around her, a room she recognised, with its pastel patterned wallpaper and dark leather suite. There was the pinewood dresser with her little brother's school photos in their shiny silver frames. She was home. Home. Madeira Avenue, Worthing, Sussex. 2 figures sat on the sofa in front of her, their heads bowed towards each other. One was her mother, the blonde hair tousled and uncombed, the eyeliner tear-streaked and dabbed away with a Kleenex. The other was her father, but a bent and broken version. Not the vibrantly intimidating man she always tried so hard to please. Her mother buried her face in his chest. Jacey realised that he was crying as well. The hands lay in his lap, entwined like a knot. She moved around in front of them. Mum, Dad. They didn't look up. Of course they didn't. She could see them properly now. With the sunlight cast through the slits in the drawn blinds, their forms became all too clear. Drained of colour and mass, as if caught between 2 worlds. They were no longer Mum and Dad, but mere shadows. Sitting there before her, oblivious to her presence, they had become shadow people. Or was she the shadow? She sank to her knees. Mum, can you hear me? It's Jacey. I'm still alive. You've got to believe that. Don't give up on me. I'll find a way back to you all. I swear I will. Harriet Jackson slowly raised her head as if she'd heard someone calling her name. She looked straight through her daughter, then turned back to her husband. I think she's gone. Mum! How? He asked her. I felt it somehow, just now. Mum, I'm still here! But she wasn't. She was standing on the street outside their house. A car drove through her body before she could move out of its way. She looked over at the house's drawn blinds. She couldn't go back in there again. Jacey turned to begin the short walk into town. She cut across the neatly plotted gardens of Beach House Park, past the young couple pushing the pram and the little knot of schoolboys playing football around the Keep Off the Grass signs. She continued along the sun-baked pavement of the Brighton Road, although her feet felt no sensation of heat. After a few minutes the road turned towards the high street, but Jacey kept walking straight on. Through the cars that edged the main roundabout like dodgems at a fair, through the shadows of the shoppers down Warwick Street, past the bank and the brewery and the wine bar, the people seated beneath the sunshades at the bistro as they sipped their lattes and chatted about the sales. Now she stood beneath the trees in the little square in Chapel Road. This was the place it had happened, the place that would always be special to her because it was the exact spot where Ralph Carton had kissed her. She'd been 15 and had been her first fantastically incredible, oh my God, kiss. But then he stood her up on their third date so he could go to London with his mates. She came home and went up to her room before anyone else downstairs could see her tears. She'd sworn that Ralph Carton was a pillock and she never wanted to see his stupid face again. But that first kiss she would never, ever forget. "I'm here," she said, the words out loud as the shadow people swished past her, through her, swirled around her in a whirlwind of hazy, half-formed faces. "I'm here and I'm ready. Come and take me where I have to go." The whirlwind quickened. She was sucked inside it. Now she span as well, trapped in its vortex as the G-force pushed and pulled her body and pummeled her face. She wanted to scream, but there was no breath left in her lungs. The pummeling grew less, the spinning slowed, then finally stopped. Her head ached. She felt a strange clawing weight around her legs. She realised that her eyes were screwed tight and she opened them, cautiously. She was standing in the sea up to her waist, below a bright summer sky. Before her the waves broke against a short stony beach surrounded by a high chalk cliff. A dark speck of something moved on top of them. Jacey raised a hand to shield her eyes just in time to see the speck tumble off the edge of the cliff and fall to the rocks below.